Shabbat Shalom. We are in a sacred time in our calendar called the counting of the Omer, the time between Passover and Shavuot. Our Parsha describes this period as an agricultural experience of anticipation leading up to Shavuot. Shavuot literally translates as weeks, and it is called because it takes place 7 full weeks after the barley harvest on Pesach. As the verse goes, and you shall count off 7 weeks from the day after Shabbat, from the day on which you bring the sheaf of elevation, they shall be complete. You shall count until the day after the 7th Shabbat, 50 days, and then you shall present an offering of new grain to God, which is the wheat harvest. But our sages made Shavuot and the counting of the Omer take on another historical dimension. If Pesach commemorates the Exodus from Egypt, then Shavuot is about the revelation on Mount Sinai. By adding this dimension of sacred time, then this Omer period is likened to the wandering of the people of Israel that they did in the wilderness after leaving Egypt on the way to Sinai. And the Torah tells us that Moses led them on a circuitous route to the mountain so that they would have the opportunity to shake the slave mentality and be ready to serve God. Now, for many of us, our counting of the Omer has been an opportunity to purify our minds and hearts day by day, week by week, so that we are ready to receive something deep, real, and transformative on Shavuot. However, over time, these days of anticipation became mingled with sadness and even mourning. Beginning in the Gaonic period, which is between the 6th and 11th century CE, marriages were discouraged, then haircutting, and eventually the use of musical instruments. Tradition associates the sadness of the Omer with the death of the students of the Talmudic sage Rabbi Akiva. As recounted in the Talmud, Rabbi Akiva had 12,000 pairs of disciples, all of whom died at the same time. It is taught all of them died between Pesach and Shavuot. Rabbi Chia ben Avin said, all of them died a cruel death. Now, historians have long struggled to reconstruct just what might have taken place to cause the death of so many students in such a short time. A common view is that Rabbi Akiva's students followed his guidance and joined Bar Kokhba's revolt against the Romans. He thought that Bar Kokhba, an Israelite general, was the Messiah. Now, the revolt was unsuccessful, and thousands of students died. Now, whether this view is historically accurate or not, the idea that Rabbi Akiva's disciples died in a revolt against Roman oppressors is a powerful story because it questions our most fundamental theology, the redemptive vision of the Exodus. The Exodus from Egypt is our fundamental Jewish story, which we recount twice daily on Shabbatot and festivals, and of course, Pesach. It wasn't meant to be understood as a fleeting moment in history. Instead, it's, as Rabbi Shai Held teaches, part of God's struggle to have cosmos prevail over chaos, to have life triumph over death, and to have goodness overcome cruelty and tyranny. He teaches that creation in the Tanakh does not mean that God creates something out of nothing, but rather that God subdues the forces of chaos, enabling order to emerge and life to flourish. So our immersion into the theology of Exodus is the assertion of faith in the power of redemption, that our lives can be one that brings life and goodness into the world no matter the challenges. God rising up to liberate God's people instills the hope and confidence that God will do it again, that we can overcome the obstacles in our lives. So now, imagine Rabbi Akiva's students, afflicted by a merciless enemy, Rome. They take God's promise into their own hands and attempt to cast off the yoke of oppression. And they fail. And God is silent. The Exodus may be a paradigm for how Jewish history is supposed to look, but for now, tragically and inexplicably, history makes a mockery of that paradigm. Many of us can relate to expectations dissolved and hopes vanquished. We can witness the face of such injustice and nothing seems to make it right. We can watch the current events of our lives seem to cast out the hopes we have for the future. And when we experience these challenges, our reaching for the Exodus model can seem inauthentic. God redeems us? How? When? What sign do I have that it will be true? So that even as we count day by day with the intention to purify our hearts and our character defects in anticipation for receiving Torah on Shavuot, we also mourn. We mourn because our experience falls so unbearably short of the redemption we have been promised and assured will come. The grieving aspect of the Omer teaches us that we can have space for loss and for tears and still move forward with hope. We can be real about our dashed hopes and dreams and still work to bring God's presence into the world. Grief does not have the final or even the loudest word. The path to redemption rarely fulfills our expectations of what we think it should look like. And yet, each year, Shavuot promises a new and expanded vision of redemption that can guide our hearts and our lives. Hope you have a beautiful Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom.